In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at Maya Quad Draw, UV mapping, and baking in Substance Painter. We'll be opening up the files that we made in the first part. I've also uploaded these to this location, so you can download the reference files that were exported and the high poly meshes that were created in Zbrush. So moving through this tutorial, we're going to import the files, start to use Quad Draw, which allows us to essentially draw on top of an existing mesh. So you can see I'm starting to redraw all the edges of this model, redrawing the handle, the hinges. I plan on baking the metal parts separately from the door, and that way I can avoid issues when baking, when transferring detail from a high poly mesh to a low poly mesh. You can see I've exported out my new low poly with a single material on it, and I also smoothed the faces for good baking. I've UV mapped it, so very quickly kind of automatically done the door and went through the handles and some of the other elements as well, just showing you kind of an automatic map and stitching and some parts unfolding and some different types of projections I use to get these results, but it doesn't take very long, and quickly I'm arranging the UVs as packing out this 0 to 1 space as much as possible to get the best resolution. I can then export this low poly model with UVs into Substance Painter and load in our two high poly meshes, and then create these textures from the high to the low. When I bake them, they create a normal map and various other maps, which I'll talk about during the video. So this is the final baked version. So our low poly model with our high resolution textures on there, and I did a quick texturing pass of the door. These are the files created in the last tutorial: the door high, door handle high, and the door handle low and door low. And these low poly ones, these were the decimations that were done in Zbrush at the end of the last tutorial. We're now going to go into Maya and import the low ones. So file, import. You should have the OBJ files for door low and door handle low. So let's import door underscore low. And you can see it's not particularly low. It's still at 356,000 because that was just a decimation to get it into Maya. We now want to quad draw it to get it even lower. So to do that, just have your door low selected, hit the magnet at the top. It's now a live surface, and I can draw on this surface. I can draw on it using Quad Draw, and you can access that by going to this menu in the top right and Quad Draw just down here. And in here you get lots of different options because there is quite a lot of functionality to Quad Draw. It also has its keyboard mouse shortcuts. So this is some of the functions that it does using hotkeys, and I recommend you use hotkeys when using Quad Draw because it's really going to speed you up. And the way it works is you essentially draw out quads. So I can zoom in. Let's go into a front view actually, and zoom in here, and just left mouse click in these corners, and it will drop this green dot, and do another one in this corner over here and this corner over here. So you make 4 dots and you hold down shift in the middle of them, and it will create a quad. And there we have a quad. So I could do that again over here. So this point here, this point here. So I've got 2 that I've made, and there's these 2 that already exist. So if I press shift, I can create another quad in between there. I can also hold down the tab key and left mouse drag, and that will extrude it. So I've extruded that piece out there. I can hover over an edge or point and then just left mouse and drag them to position them where I want them. So if I position that one over here and this one over here, and we can arrange these to be as accurate as we want. So something like that is good. If I zoom out a bit and add another point to the bottom of this and another one here, I can press Ctrl Z and undo those 2, or I can hold down Ctrl and Shift and hover, and that will delete any point. It'll also delete a quad if I hold down Ctrl Shift and delete that. But I want to add 2 points here, so one here, one here. And if I hold down Shift, in theory, it should pick up those top 2. Yeah. Sometimes you have to move the camera around a little bit for Quad Draw to work out where that position is, but you should be able to make that piece there. And we'll do again over here with the dots and finish out. We'll just use the extrude. Okay, once you've got those, just extrude off the side of this. Oops. What you'll notice also is if you hold down Tab and just draw, it'll draw out lines like this. But you can do that by accident, but it can be useful in a different scenario. But I just want to extrude off of here. You'll notice it'll automatically merge the points when I drag them into each other. Okay, I can also insert more points. If I hold down Control, you'll see this green line appears, so I could insert another point here, another one here if I wanted to add a little extra detail, which I think I will. That's still not going to be too high poly. If I press Q, I can come out of Quad Draw, go into my object mode, and just press Control D, and it will duplicate that shape. Press W to move, and center the pivot with this button up here. I can then move this shape over here, so just use a duplicate, save us having to keep redrawing this shape. That's about right. Control D again. Move that one down. You'll notice that these ones are a little bit shorter than the top ones. So if I right mouse over it and go to my vertex selection, select the bottom ones. You can press 4 if you find it easier to see what's going on. You'll see the slide appears because it's still trying to snap to the surface of the object, even outside of Quad Draw, so you don't have to be in Quad Draw to use a live surface. Okay, then you can merge all 4 of these together. So just select all 4 of those shapes and press Combine, which is this button up here. I then might delete the history. I tend to delete the history always after combining. And we want to kind of put this shape together. So we can do that. If we go back to Quad Draw, hold down the Shift key, it's going to find the in between on some of these shapes. Shift again, here, here, here. And then we just need to do that outside area. So holding down Tab and drawing from here will add these sections. Not worried about being terribly accurate, but I will zoom in and just try and straighten these out a little bit. Sometimes they can slip off the front of the mesh, and that way you have to kind of turn your camera to get hold of the point again. This will happen certainly when you're starting out with Quad Draw and you're not hitting the right positions all the time. Do try and avoid the dip just because it will make a slow curve across the shape, so let's try and keep the points from going into the little gap. So I can go in and select all the outer edge, so like a long row of vertices along this end, and just scale them in. That will straighten that edge and just get it to be right on the side. Do the same on this side. So I'm just scaling it along one axis, along the x-axis, just to get them all to line up straight, and then pull them across. I'll do the same on the top, just in the y-axis. And the same down here. I'm also going to try and flatten them out a little bit as well. I can do that by selecting this side and scaling them so they're aligned, and then move them up a little bit just to get them to align. Just going to spend a little bit of extra time making sure you get it right, because we're going to mirror this whole shape to the other side of the door, so we don't want to have to tweak both sides of the door at any point. So I'm just going to zoom around close up, just make sure my points are lining up pretty well. There's no accidental merging of any points. Okay, so that'll probably do for that. And then let's mirror this object. So by selecting it, press Ctrl D, W, move it over to one side. Click on your mirror function, and we want to go in Z. Okay, so that's on that side. Turn off merge borders. Do not merge borders. And that will probably do. Just go to object mode. Go to a face selection, select all the faces of this version, delete them because we have this one still on this side, and then let's move this by centering the pivot, moving it across. You want to be pretty accurate with this, so zoom right in and position it as close as you can to overlapping. Okay, now if we select both of those pieces and press Ctrl and 1, it's going to isolate them both, that hiding the reference that we were using. Hit combine so they're both one mesh. Go to edge, double click on this outer edge, hold down shift and double click on the other outer edge, and then go to bridge, which is this button up here. And we just filled in that gap. I'm just going to grab all the vertices on this side, so press 4, go to a right hand view, and I'm going to select all these points on this side. And with W pressed, I'm just going to drag these in a little bit so they snap to the surface better. You can see it all just kind of pulled to the surface as I move them across. I could select these top ones and pull them up a bit. And I'll probably do the same at the very bottom where it's come up a tad. I can probably do the same on this side. Let's pull it out a little bit. And over here. Press 5, back to quad draw. And see that point's not quite on the corner. So definitely worth taking the time to nudge points around if you think that they could be aligned better. There'll be a little bit of variation on the object, and that's fine because it will feel a bit more real if it's not 100% accurate. But you don't really want to deform the shape. Okay, that's going to do. And now let's move on to the handle. I'm just going to clean it up a little bit by deleting the history, naming it as door underscore low, lowercase, and that's how we use it in Substance Painter. I can delete that empty group node. I've still got that reference, and now we can import the other part. So file, import door handle low. And I'll just Control-1 to isolate that. This object has got a few different challenges in terms of the different shapes that we've got to try and recreate. I guess there's some stuff we can duplicate across. Some stuff we're going to start off with probably a cylinder. But first we need to set this object as our live surface by using the magnet at the top, and then we can go back to quad draw and we can start to build out this shape here. Might find it easier in a front view. And I'm just going to start to place the points as we did before. And if I start to extrude up this shape, as it finds the edge, it's going to try and start to taper along with it. We can add one in the middle just to get that top point there. And move one across here. Something like that shape's fine. I'm just going to start to extrude down. I'm only going to worry about building half of this, and then I'll just mirror it across because it's easier than doing both sides. And I'm just extruding out more sides. I'm going to need a few extra sides here to recreate this circle shape. I might add another division here, or edge loop. You can hold down shift and that will relax points. So if I push shift along the edge, it will just even out the spacing a little bit. You don't want to overuse it because it will start to pull it apart because I have big spacing between some of the polygons, but it works okay when small clusters. So I'm using the tab key and the middle mouse button to extrude out entire edge rows, and that's quite useful for speeding up chunks of the quad drawing because it can be quite time consuming. I'm just trying to work out how many points I need to make up a decent cylinder at the top. It's a good idea to use big extrusions like that because it'll just massively speed up the way you get through your models. Then you can always add more edge loops and tidy parts up later on. If we'll just straighten out this outer edge. Just introduce another edge just so I can smooth this shape out. I could triangulate at the ends, but I'm not going to just yet. It does add some extra interest to keep it there. I do want to delete these faces over here, so I just went out of Quad Draw, and to delete those faces I want to straighten that central line, so let's just go into a front view and select all of the very last edges, these ones. Cool, that's nice and straight. And then I'm just going to mirror the object from this side to the other side, so mirror in X, here's an X plus. It's usually dependent on the pivot point, so because my pivot point's miles away, let's put it over there, but I can just move that pivot along and get the mirror to go where I want. So you can see it's kind of crunching all the shape, and that's just because merge borders is on. So if I hit do not merge borders, we'll stop doing that. Let's select these side edges. You can see I haven't merged in the middle just yet, so let's make sure we do that. We could have set it on the mirror, but I can go in and select all of the, select those 2 points, merge them to center, merge those points, and for the rest of them, I can kind of just select all of them at once, so a long line down the middle, quite thin, and then I can use this button here, which will merge vertices that are sat in a short distance together, so you can do it by a threshold. So if I press 1, or if I went higher, let's put in 100, it'll merge all of the points to there, but because I'm doing it by a distance of 10, it will do it to there, 1, it won't move them at all, and that's what I want. So now I know they're all merged together, I can then, you see it's merged the top one, so I probably merged it too far. Let's do it again, merge, and instead of 1, maybe 0.5, and that will merge all of them. And then I can double click this edge, and now it's selected all of the outer edge. You can see it's not quite as straight as I'd probably like it, so I'm just going to deselect half, and just shimmy this bit over a little bit, and then select that outer edge and press Ctrl E, then W, and then in a perspective mode I can just move this lot back. So all I did was extrude it and then move it back along the side. Oh, didn't quite extrude, so Ctrl E, W, move, and that's just extruded that face out of the edge. I can hold down Control if I go to my quad draw. I can hold down Control and click on this edge and just add a little bevel that runs around. I might add another one here, and you'll see that starts to grab the edges. And probably another one down the bottom. I might remove some of these, so Control and Shift, get rid of that, get rid of that. And I want to smooth that out a little bit, so I'm just going to hold down Shift. Try not to get the outer edge, but just try and even out this edge flow a little bit. Something like that. Probably don't need to go all the way up. Should I get rid of that? And then I can reinsert it, and it's a bit of a smoother edge. Same as this one, I can get rid of it. And add it again. If I press Q to come out of quad draw again, select this outer edge, I just want to position it a little bit better. I could scale it out a little bit and move it back. Just make sure you're capturing as much of that shape as possible. If I press Ctrl E, then W again, move it back. So what that does is extrude and then move. And it'll add that little lip edge. You can see some of it's folded at the top there, so I'll undo it. I'm just going to straighten that edge out by scaling in one direction. And keep looking over your model to make sure you're not introducing any errors anywhere. And it's quite round. We could even this out a little bit more just by grabbing some points and moving them along. And because we're trying to make a circle, it's just best to try and even these out as much as possible. Then I can go into my face front view and delete half again. And didn't quite get the top bit. Make sure you get all of the half when you delete and see what that's actually done. So I've left that face, left that face. This edge isn't really looking very good. Let's do it by a point. I think it's kind of because it's folded over itself a little bit there. So I'll just fix that by grabbing that edge, and you will get the odd problem when quad drawing where things don't go where you really want them to. I'll probably move that whole edge back. And that leaving that out. I want to get this central edge, but deselect along here. So there's quite a lot of reselecting and deselecting just to pick out the right parts. But I want to keep that straight, and then I can mirror the whole thing again. So mirror, move that point back. You might actually leave the merge borders on, but just reduce the threshold to about 0.01. And that way they're only going to merge if they're sat in the same point, which they are there. Let's bring back more reference. .1. Make it go a little bit higher than that. 0.5. And that will do. Okay, so now we've quad drawn that shape. I'm just going to extrude off of this edge here to make our handle. So I've just double clicked that edge and press Ctrl E, W, and that will move this cylinder. You can see it's still snapping to this shape. If I move it right to the end and then hold down Control, got a quad draw, hold down Control, and I can insert some edge loops to better capture this shape. So something like that, and that's kind of caught the handle. I want to add some more edges to go over the actual handle part, so go to a face select, edge, double click on this outer edge, and I kind of want to deselect half of it, so just holding down Control, drawing a marquee. Now I can press Control E, then W, and just move out half of that shape. I'll move it out a little bit. You can see it's still snapping to the surface, which is what we want. Press Control E, then W again. I'll go a little further up. And I'm just going to keep extruding along this shape. I might need to scale it up a little bit because you can see it's dipping inside. I might even scale this edge up as well. And I'm just moving, double clicking and moving these points so they snap a little better. If I just want to select one edge to the other one down here, I can hold down the select the top one, hold down Shift and double click that one. It will just select from here this point to this point, which is what we wanted. And then I can extrude again and keep moving down, probably till I get to here. That's fine. And then I'll isolate my selection. So Control 1 on this object. And you can see what we've got so far. It looks like most of the handle and the joint. We just need to start moving down this handle part and merging up some of these points. So to do that, I can start to bridge some areas. So if I just select this edge and press bridge, you see that will bridge a shape across there. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4 along the top, and 1, 2, 3, 4 along the bottom, and bridge again, it'll always bridge and to an even number. As long as there was 4 at the top and 4 at the bottom, I can complete a shape that way. Right, so we want to start going down the handle. So I'm going to go back into Quad Draw and try and extrude probably a long shape along here, down to around this section, and put another one to about here. But I'll delete this one because I don't really need that. I just want to kind of complete a shape, and the reason I'm doing it separately is because it's very easy to end up with kind of endless loops where you can kind of double click an edge and it will just spiral all the way around your model. And I can avoid doing that by making sure that at this end there is definitely not spiraling edges. But I do need to get a good amount of edges around the shape first. So
There we go.
nice, so this edge is definitely good for going down the model. Might add an extra one here and here. And this way I can join up this shape with this one. So let's start pulling off edges and getting them to combine. I'm going to need to kind of split the shape over here somewhere, so I'm going to add an extra one and just start to make out some new quads, and that way I can get more edges than what I had to start with, just by making shapes like this, getting good edge flow, but still adding more geometry, so it's all still quads. Let's pull this shape down to around here. Okay, I'm just going to come out of quad draw now and start trying to line up these edges a little better. If I press D, I can move the pivot point and start to scale things based on their actual position. It's even easier to do in the front view. And just start to scale it in. It's still snapping to the shape that it sounds, so it just helps me get an even better edge flow to this quad draw. I can press Control E and start to extrude down the shape again, rotating the pivot first, just pressing D and then D again. Control. Oops. Okay, that's to prefer to go a long way around the model if I can, but make sure that the shape isn't buckling at all, and start to rotate the shape around. If we go back into 5 just to check how things are going, you can always press Control 1 to isolate your view. There is a couple of triangles, but nothing to worry about. They're kind of hidden anyway behind the handle. It's mostly this front shape that I want to keep good. We have matched what we've got so far pretty well, and this is the more difficult part of the quad draw because it's the handle that has quite a lot of shape and a lot of importance. In a first person game, you'd see it close up pretty easily. I'm just going to carry on extruding down this shape until I get to the end.
I'm just going to try and close the hole.
Get that curve right. It's still snapping to the surface even though I've got this image isolated, so it doesn't really matter if I see it or not. But I will find it easier if I just jump back into quad draw. There's quite a bit of shape at the end, so I'm going to add some extra edge loops as well. I'm going to press shift and smooth that out around there. Might add another edge loop. I don't really want to add anything that spirals around the mesh, but certainly just holding down shift and smudging across it seems to help it catch the shape. It will try and tighten up at the top, but what I'd rather do there is add a few extra edge loops that go around the mesh, because there is quite a bit more shape than what I'm seeing. But before I do that, I'm just going to straighten up these main lines. So if you press Q, go to edge, and double click on one of these edges, you'll see it goes pretty much all the way around the mesh. I'm just going to scale it in this sideways in the Z axis. That'll just make this line a little bit straighter, maybe slightly rotate it. And I'll do the same with this one. I slightly straightened it out there. I'm now going to insert a couple of edge loops along the top here. one here, and another one over here. And just so I can start to smooth out the shape a little bit, I can remove these again later on if I want. But for now, I'm just going to hold down the Shift key, and I can kind of brush, and it will start to smooth out some of these edges. I just want to try and get a bit closer to natural curve. If I want to make the relax bigger, I can press B on my keyboard or hold down B and left mouse drag right or left, and you see this glows getting bigger, this soft selection. If I make it a big soft selection, then hold down Shift, you see it'll start to smooth quite a lot of it, but it will quickly destroy the shape or pull all these faces up, so probably don't get too carried away with it. But all the time it's helping it grab that edge. That's kind of messed with the shape a bit over there. Probably don't want to fiddle with that too much more, but certainly for down here, it's getting a little bit better. Press B again, and you can get rid of that soft selection. I might just pull a few more bits down. Press Control 1, and I'll bring back our reference so you can put the lines back on the contours, which you can see here. I'm just going to grab that edge again and scan it back in. Okay, I think that's probably pretty close for the handle. Maybe just this bit here still needs tweaking a little bit more, where it gets quite a high edge. Okay, I think that's going to do it for the handle piece. The other two parts should be a lot easier to do than that piece. So let's bring it all back and move on to the lock section. So what we're going to want to do, turn on quad draw again, and we'll just start placing points on this shape. And add one here. To this one, probably want to make quite a few triangles to make this section. Hopefully one that doesn't grab there. Let's position one here and here, and then one that will go on the top of this, that polygon. Okay, so for the last bit, I'm just going to double click this outer edge and press Control E and move it back, just to try and capture some of that shade. I'm just going to try and slide things around a little bit to help them match the object that I'm quad drawing on. And just straightening out some edges just by scaling 2 points. And that's going to do it for that. So that should look like this. This face came out a little inverted, so I'm just going to delete it and recreate it. It's better, and that piece is nearly done. I might just add a little extra edge here just to get it to bevel. Maybe here. I'm not really getting much for that, but that's fine. I can bake that other object to here. Let's go and work on the hinge section. The most difficult part on this hinge would be these cylinder sections. So to start quad drawing this, I'm actually going to bring in the cylinder. So just go to click on the cylinder shape up here, and that should bring it into your scene. Press W. And if I hold down the V key, it will snap to a point, and I can drag it and make it snap to my top of my hinge. So I was just holding down the V key, it snapped to this point. And I'm then just going to scale it up. It's probably got more divisions to it than I actually need, so I'm just going to click on my attribute editor and piece and over here, and change my subdivisions to maybe 10, and that'll be fine. It's not that big in the final asset. Let's position it a little better, and I can do that by pressing D, then hold down V and snap the pivot to this point, then press D again, and then I can just hold down the V key again and snap it to the middle of this, if there is a middle to this. Yeah, it doesn't seem to have a central point, but that's okay. I can probably just line it up by eyesight. But really important that we try and keep our low poly meshes as close as possible to the high poly. The live surface will get this to snap back to the object. Let's make sure it is a live surface. Oh, it is now. And you can see it was starting to automatically try and snap as I move down. I might just turn off live surface while I position this one. I want to delete some faces from this, probably some of the unseen faces. So if I delete this one, and then I can move that edge to extrude along. So grab that from there. I'm just pressing 5 and 4 to go between the two. I'll probably delete that face as well, and then just extrude this edge off of here. So Control E, W, and that will move out. Just to make sure it's totally straight, I'll just scale it, but I think that should all be straight and aligned pretty well. We'll duplicate this shape 2 more times, so Control D, move it up, position it on this one. It looks slightly shorter. There we go, and duplicate that again. And then we have it here. Okay, so I can just merge those three shapes together. I'll make this a live surface again now, so just hit the magnet, select these three, and hit combine. I can then go into my quad draw again. Quad draw can also be found on this button here, quad draw. Hold down the tab key, shift key, fill in those gaps. If I hold down tab and middle mouse, just drag that over. Get that to align to that a bit better. This could snap a little better over here. And some of the faces seem to intersect a little bit just where I've overlapped it, so I might move this one around a tad. This way I can get a straight edge to run across this edge here. Okay, now just do the border edge around here. We should be able to do that all just on the tab key and middle mouse. No, let's get that side. And then we can do that a bit straighter. It might save me some time realigning it. Doesn't really need to worry about this side because we're never going to see it. It's going to be intersecting with the door. We do just want to check that all of these things are snapped together properly and are aligning with the model. Might add just a couple of additional edge loops to give it some more shape. So maybe one here. Seems to pull that down a little bit. Maybe we'll add that one, but then just hold down, we'll press B, hold down shift, and just give it a bit of a smooth on the top, help it snap. Or maybe I can just move it a little bit. Let's insert that edge loop. Select all the vertices, so probably come out of quad draw. I'm just going to scale it a bit, and that will make it all snap back to these points. Just kind of rotated it a tad, so I'll delete that edge, go back into quad draw, maybe just realign a few of these points. Again at the bottom, doesn't seem to have snapped particularly well, so if I just shift them up and down a little bit, they'll snap back to the surface because it's a live surface. Might just need scaling a tad. I'll probably do that with all of them just to double check they're all right on the surface. So that's all I'm doing, is just moving and scaling very slightly. Okay, we should now be able to go back into Quad Draw and insert edge loops and not have it react in a strange way. It's actually getting a slightly softer curve on there. Might add another one around here. And one on the bottom edge as well. And that'll do. I might come back and remove them nearer the end because they're not really necessary and they're adding to the poly count, but they might improve the bake. Having slightly softer corners can mean the baking process that we do in Substance Painter can go a little better. So I'll leave it like this and maybe just straighten out a few of the points. Slide that one up. I'll go into a front view or a right view. Okay, that's fine. Now bring all the meshes back. And we can kind of tidy up our outliner a little bit just to merge some of these meshes that we've now retopologized. So you can see we've got these P cylinders and transform nodes. But if I select all of these meshes just by selecting the bottom one, pressing Shift, selecting the top one, I can delete the history, click on this button, and that will tidy up some of it. We can merge some of the elements, so merging the low poly parts, which is like the lock here, the handle, and the hinge we just made. I'm just going to combine them and delete the history again. For the hotkey for delete history is Alt Shift and D, and that deletes the history of that. I'm not going to merge the other door handle just yet, just because I'm going to UV map one version and then transfer that version that has UVs already, which is going to be the next part of what we do, which is making the UVs for this door and this surface, which I'll just name handle. And now I'm just going to tweak the meshes a little bit, just as a kind of a final pass to make sure everything's snapping together, because it's going to save us a lot of time. If we bake it with errors, we're going to have to come back and fix it and then rebake it. So it's good to go over and just do some final tweaks. I might insert some extra edges on these corners. I find that I get slightly better bakes. I can always come back and delete these after the texture's created, because they're not going to be on UV seams. That will just add a little extra shape to the corners and just make sure that they're all snapping together nicely. You can check whether these are still aligned properly, which it looks like. That's fine. So this all looks pretty good. Let's start to duplicate some of these parts around. So I'm just going to hide the two high poly ones. So select them there and press Control H, and they should be gone. Turn off your live surface, and we need to mirror this handle from this side to the other side. So the easiest way to do that would just be press Control D to duplicate, move it across, and then just delete the bits we don't want. So this hinge here, or the lock and the hinge. Then with the object selected, we can move the pivot point to be nearer the middle. So press D, hold V, and that'll snap there, then D again. Then just go to mirror. We want it in the Z axis, and we want to do it based on the object's axis position, and we don't want to merge the points on the edge. So if I just move that away, you'll see we've got a nice mirrored version of that handle. And then I can delete this handle and move this one into its position, which should be perfectly on the edge here. To be exactly sure where this goes, we could unhide our high poly and just match it up in here. Center the pivot. So that's a pretty good match for that. And then we need to duplicate this hinge at the top here. So again, I'll just select the low poly, Control D, duplicate that, move the hinge to where it's supposed to be, which is roughly there. I can delete the other parts just by selecting the faces. Then all I've got is this as an object, center the pivot, oops, on this one, center the pivot. And we just want to move it to match that position. Right, that's pretty good. So let's merge all of our parts. We can get rid of this now. We're not using it anymore. I'm just going to hide it. But the high polys stuff we're done with in the Maya scene. This is all we're left with. Our game ready model. Well, it needs UV mapping and texturing, but pretty close to being ready. So first thing I want to do is merge all of these parts, all of the metal parts essentially, into one object. So let's combine them. And we're going to have that called door underscore handle low, but let's delete the history first. Get rid of any stuff in here that we don't need. And then we have it door underscore handle underscore low. And then our door itself is door underscore low, so that's fine. Now we need to start UV mapping this object. So to do that, we're just going to go into our UV editing workspace. This is the window for our UVs, and this menu, the UV toolkit, is kind of our UV tools, really, our options for cutting up UVs and laying out UVs. And we have this create option here. So if you go to create and just press automatic, that'll do a projection from essentially 6 different directions. So the top, bottom, sides, front and back, and it will do a best guess kind of based on that. You can see it hasn't done a great job. It's kind of split it up into pieces, but we can stitch some of these pieces back together easily enough. So if I just take out the bits that I don't want to stitch back together, so let's say this edge, this one and this one, they make up the 4 parts from the top and the bottom and the sides. So I just move them out of the way, and the rest of it I can just stitch back together. So if I go to an edge selection, select all of those edges, I don't want to stitch these to this one because that's going to deform the shape. Like if I go to cut and sew and hit stitch together, it's going to stack them all on top of each other and make a bit of a mess. So we don't want to do that. I'm just going to Control Z that. We can select them all and then deselect these ones. So hold down Control, deselect that, and then hit stitch together. And that will just pull all of those edges together. It has still made a little bit of a mess, but we can fix that, but it's kept the door shape. So right mouse and go to UV and select all of these inside UV faces here. Hold down Shift, do the same here again. And then just go to unfold and press unfold. And that's going to relax all those shapes and give you nice grid on your UVs. So if I turn on my checkerboard, you can see that I've got some good even resolution running across the model. This one is kind of upside down, so I'm just going to select the shell. So right mouse, UV shell, press rotate, hold down J, and it will rotate. So I've got that to roll over there, and I'll move these over to the side here. And that's these parts done. We can move on to the handle. So let's select that. And to start with, I'm going to press automatic again just to see all the pieces. So these are all the UVs that make up the handle, the hinge, and the lock. I'm going to try and separate these parts out, not as an automatic projection, because it's kind of made too many pieces. It'd be easier just to go in and do each bit individually. So I'll just select the faces that make up the hinges. So I'll just go to a face select and select it on the model. Hold down Shift, select the bottom hinge, and just move them to one side. I'll do that with my lock in the middle there. Just try and get to a good angle and select that. Or I could just double click on one face and it will select the whole lot. Move that over here. And I'll do the same with each handle. So this handle over here. And this one over here. So I'll probably start with the trickier one, which is the handles. So let's close our outliner and then go to a face select and just select the grip part in a marquee selection. We can deselect that last row there. It's going to be important where you position your camera because you don't want to accidentally not select a part. You can see I've got that entire grip. If I turn off my checkerboard, it becomes a little more obvious. And going to this view, you can really see which edge I caught there. And then it's going to go into a flat projection, so planar map, just to get this shape. And then we can start to unfold and split some of the parts. So like if I was unpeeling a banana, I'll need to cut the edge off and cut a seam down the side, or cut the end off. So if I go to an edge selection and just double click here, I'll get that entire edge. If I press F, we'll see which edge that was. I haven't got to put a seam in here, which doesn't really show up that much when you bake in Substance, certainly if you use smooth or normal, so it shouldn't be a big deal, but I do need to put a cut somewhere, so just cut that edge. And we're going to run an edge in a less visible spot, so probably from here, and then if I hold down shift and double click here, deselect that one, I just want to go all the way to the end and all the way to this red patch here. So I've got an edge that runs all the way across. I'll cut there and then go to my UVs, select the whole model or the whole grip and hit unfold, and then I'll have these two pieces. So that's the end and that's the whole handle. Now we can find the base for the handle, which is it this piece here, or we can select it here. Okay, it's this one over here, and we want to connect these two side edges. So if I select just through the middle like that, without connecting with the ends, just right across, maybe add those last two. So just holding down shift and adding those, I can just hit stitch together, and that will stitch to the sides of this. I'm not going to be able to stitch the top bit because that's going to bend that shape, so I'm going to keep them both separate, but I can find them just by even if I went to a UV shell selection, and I can still select UV shells over here. So I'm just holding down shift, clicking on those top ones, and I know that's one row, so I can go to an edge selection, select all those edges, deselect the edges from here, and then press stitch together, and then I've got one row. I can select those UVs and then go to straighten UVs, and that will just even them out a little better. Then I can pack them a little closer together now if I do that. So I'm going to need to do that for the bottom half as well. So again, go to a UV shell selection, this one, shift, those, and then just move them out of the way for a second. You can just select the edges of those, deselect the edges from the base and stitch together, and then go to UVs and straighten UVs, and then we have the top and the bottom of that. They should be more or less the same size. Cool. Then we want to grab the handle. So if I go to a face selection and double click on all of that and then deselect the grip, you might have to deselect the handle as well, and then you'll just be left with these parts in the middle, and that's our handle. I could probably just stitch the edges together. So if I select them all and then deselect all of that, it means I've only selected the sides. I need to deselect one edge because I can't stitch the whole thing together. So just this edge will do. I shouldn't still have the top of that selected, so let's just make sure I've deselected it from everywhere. Yep, that seems fine. So stitch together, not quite. Deselect that edge and then stitch together. Cool, and that's all one row. I can unfold that, and that's the handle part in the middle done. So then I've got this done and this one, and plus this one, and that makes up our entire handle piece here. So if I select all of those shells, I'm selecting all of that handle. I don't really want to have to do that twice, so I'll probably just mirror that object over again. So if I have all of those faces selected and just go to duplicate faces, duplicate currently selected faces, and then go back to an object selection, I should be able to deselect those objects and just be left with this. If I go to my outliner, you'll see that it's split it by the UVs, but I can combine them back together just by going to combine and move it across, and you'll see it's a duplicate of that handle because I duplicate the faces. I can mirror this back over again, so just hit your mirror button, mirroring in Z, and move the pivot over, and we've got the opposite half. I can then go to a face selection, select all of those faces and delete them, and all we've done is really mirror that over again. So we could have just waited till this point to have originally mirrored them, but I don't know, it didn't really take a big amount of time, and I can always snap it pretty much to the exact same position. So like I have done there, let's nudge it a little more. If I want to be exact, I can press D, hold down V, and that will snap the pivot point to something. Then press D again, and then hold down V, and it will snap that object to the other object's point. And now I know they're definitely in the same space. Select this lock, go to a face selection, and then select those faces and deselect over there, and just delete that. And now I've got rid of the old handle and I've replaced it with this one that has the same UVs as the other one. I can select these UVs, go to transform and flip in V's, fine. And that's just going to put them the other way around so they're blue and not red like you saw before. And then I can combine this object with this one. So combine, delete the history, and we now have the UVs done for both our handles. They're not the same size, but we can fix that shortly. I just want to do the hinge and the lock section first. So with these hinges, I'm just going to move these two shells to one side. I can just start selecting these edges here in the middle because that's where the joints connect. If you see here, these cylinder parts, and go to stitch together, and I'll stitch them. You can see I've got a little bevel, so I've got to kind of select that as well. I'll do that again down here. Stitch together. This middle one needs a few more, so stitch and stitch. And that's that part done. It's got a back plate here, so I'll stitch that one on, and probably one either side here and here, and stitch those together. I can cut these balls off because I'm never going to be able to map them flat and have them not overlap. So important that we don't overlap our UVs for baking. So I'll just cut those two edges, go to a UV shell, and I'll pop these inside these gaps that were created. I'm just going to do the same for this one as well quickly. So edge selection, set those two edges and those ones stitched together. Do that again. I can press G to repeat that stitch together and just get that to go over there. These bits kind of belong in those central edges, these parts here. So I'm just going to keep them separate and maybe rotate them and position them together a little better. Probably pop those three in there and have another one down there. Cool, and stitch the back edge here, stitch together. So it's kind of important to remember all the shapes of the objects you modelled as you go, and it's going to speed up the way you UV map because you kind of know where the faces already join. I've UV mapped enough square things to know where all of the edges should be. Sometimes when you find stitch together isn't doing the job, you can just press so and it kind of forces them together. It doesn't do the same algorithm in terms of its final position of the edges, but it will stitch them together. Again, I'm just going to cut these ends off. And pop that on there. There, cool. So that should be our hinges done. There should be a few more circles knocking around, probably over here somewhere. No, no, here they all are. So these are all the other circles that make up the hinge. Maybe I'll just rotate them. I can probably place them in gaps at the end, but it's easier to try and fit them in the gaps as you go. So let's actually do that and pop them in any little gaps we have here. I do want to leave a little bit of edge padding, so I'm not going to put them too close to each other, because occasionally when you're baking you get a little extra couple of pixels of coverage like edge padding, which could potentially draw a little bit of the hinge onto a little bit of one of these. So do make sure you leave a little bit of spacing between all of your shells. So the last bit we need to do is this hinge or lock. So if I just select all the outer edges and stitch together, that's that bit done. This bit is part of the inside mechanic. I'm probably better off just cutting a seam here, so where it joins the plate. So if I cut there, I can move that bit out and then stitch the end bit over here. Maybe get the corners as well. Stitch, so. Okay, and it's got those two bits that make up the top part, which I can keep as separate, so that would be fine. And that should be it for all of our UVs. Everything's UV mapped. We do want to kind of even out the resolution of all of our objects, so we can do that just by selecting all our UVs, going to where in the transform, near the bottom where it says textile density, just hit get. 1024 is fine, and then just hit set, and that just made sure that all of our UVs are the same size across the model. We can see that by pressing the checkerboard button. The squares on there should be the same size as the squares over here and across the entire model now, which is a useful function, but we still need to lay these out inside our 0 to 1 space. So they're a bit big, so I'll scale it all down. I'll select this and the door at the same time, and we can start to kind of fill out the space a little better. So I'm going to get this door to be quite big, or at least as big as I can get it in this space. Might use some of these shells a little closer together, just so I can get the maximum resolution out of these doors that I can. But you certainly want to keep it inside this space, so that will be fine. And that looks fine, and I can fit the rest of my parts around it using as much of this space as possible. Can we get any more out of this door, do you think? Maybe if I take these two off. Yes, I can certainly get it a lot taller. Maybe if I was to position it like this. And have this one here, this one just above it. Oh, that's going to get us a nice amount of resolution on the main door and not waste too much of the space. And we can pack this stuff along the top. So let's grab our two bases, rotate them, position them up the end. One there, and another one there. Even though it make them slightly bigger than the even resolution, I will scale them a bit just so I'm using all of the texture size. It's also quite an important object because it's what you kind of stare at in the when it's used in a game, the actual handle itself. So if I can get a bit more resolution on the texture, try and do that and use all of your space. Okay, that's those two. And we've got to grab this lock. I can give that a little bit more size as well. Then we got these hinges. I might try and fit in the handles first, just because I want to give these the best resolution I can. I don't mind shrinking the hinges a little bit if I have to. I'm going to have to shrink that one a little bit. As much as I'd like to give that a bit more, I think that's the best I can do. Maybe I'm better off having them a bit more even. So maybe like that. That's fine. There's no overlap. These are the handles. I could straighten these parts, so select all the UVs and go to straighten UVs. Cool, and then they might fit in this section a little better. Might just have to shrink the door a little bit more. It doesn't mean I can scale everything else up, but I feel like everything else is getting a little bit too small to accommodate my large door. So let's see if we can use some of this space a little bit better. And certainly because I've done that, I can rearrange some stuff. So don't be afraid to undo some of the stuff that you've done already just to get a better arrangement. Pretty rare that you can get it all perfect and get a good evenish resolution across the model. I can already see that I'm starting to get better resolution on my handle than I am on the rest of the door, but maybe a little bit too much. So let's see if we can still stack them together but make it a little bigger. I wonder if even a layout, an automatic layout, would arrange that more accurate. Yeah, so just by pressing layout, you can see it just kind of packed it in there a little tighter and made sure it stayed inside the UV space. So you can use that function should you want to, but it won't do a very good job of trying to arrange all of these extra parts together. Whereas you are better off going in and manually doing this section because you'll just get better resolution for your model. Nice, then we've just got all of these little leftover parts that we can stick in that space, as I think that's all of the UV shells and they just need to be packed into here. So move that across. I'd scale up the handles quite a bit, so I should up the size of these as well. Let's try and move some of these extra parts. Make sure nothing's overlapping because that will cause us problems when we bake it out inside of Substance Painter. These are like the ends of our handles. I can always scale them up slightly just to get a few more pixels, giving it better chance of getting a nice quality bake. Okay, and that's, I think, is going to do it. I don't think I can squeeze much more out of this texture. I've gotten quite a lot of usage out of it. Let's just quickly pan over, make sure nothing's overlapping, so there's no errors that could be caused. Check over the checkerboard, make sure there's no issues with that at all, and then we can call that a done UV map. Let's save what you're doing and delete the history on your object, and we'll go back to our standard modeling mode, and we just need to export our meshes out. So we lost our name here, so let's call that door underscore handle underscore low, and then we just need to export out these two meshes, but make sure you've selected them both and gone to mesh display, soften edge, and that way we're going to get a better quality bake in the end, and then we can just export this out. So with these two selected, go file, export selection, and name it door underscore low with a lowercase low in it, and then we can open up Substance Painter to bake this out. This part of the tutorial is not going to be an introduction to Substance Painter. I'll probably do that in the next part. I really just want to focus on the baking process and how to get all of that nice detail that we made in Zbrush onto a texture that we can use in a game engine. So to start with, just go to File and New. We want the Unreal Engine 4 template. Go to Select, pick your door underscore low, the one we just exported, and everything else is fine, so just hit OK. We should now see our UV mapped model inside of Substance Painter, and we just need to bake on the detail. So to do that, go to your texture set settings and go to Bake Mesh Maps. In here, we're able to set what types of textures are going to get generated through the baking process and what exactly is going to get baked. So our output size is currently at 2048. I tend to drop that down just for a test bake because this can be quite a lengthy process. It takes a little while to process, and often mistakes can happen when you're doing it. So I tend to do my first bake at 512 at a lower resolution, and if it works, then I'll up it to something that will take a lot longer. So the next bit I'm interested in is this folder here where I load in my high definition maps. So our high maps are going to be our door handle underscore high and our door underscore high. These are the two models we exported from Zbrush. This next section on frontal distance reading and rear distance reading, that's how far away the high poly can be from the low poly before it starts to actually generate a texture. So it is important that they both occupy the same 3D space, these two models and your low poly. But we can adjust that if we find that we're missing parts. Anti-aliasing, this will improve the quality of the line, so it will also massively increase the baking time. So I won't put it on now, but I will definitely add this for the final one. And our match, we want to have by mesh name, underscore high and underscore low being the suffix. And that just means that it's going to bake our handle separate than our door, so they won't interfere with each other. And that's because we're using the names that we set beforehand by naming them both separately. And we'll leave all of these textures on. I'll explain them when they're generated. So actually, I'll turn off a few just because it will speed up our test bake. And then just press bake. I'll probably pause the video at this point just while it's processing and unpause it at the end. Okay, so that's finished baking. I did get a couple of error messages. Let's just have a quick look through the log. So unexpected illumination, this can usually be referring to maybe the material type I had assigned. Splitting meshes, door handle high, UV coordinates are missing. So this would usually mean that you've either not UV mapped a part or there was some overlapping UVs. The fact that it's referring to the door handle high makes me think that it's probably not a big issue, because even though it's very low res, because I only made it 512, you can still see that the detail has been passed onto this texture. So I'm going to ignore these errors and just go ahead and bake it at a super high resolution. So to set that up, we're going to go back to our bake mesh maps, change it from our output size to 4096. That's a really big material. I'd still probably squash that before I put it into a game, but I do like to work at a much higher resolution and then drop it down. I'll leave all of these settings the same. I'll go to anti-aliasing and change that to 8x8. And that's again a really high value that's going to take a while to process. Doing this at 2048 by 4x4 would probably be fine, and I would usually do it that way. I just wanted to get super high quality on this door. So we've still got our bake by mesh names. I want to turn on these textures on the side so they get created now. And I want to click on the word ID, and the ID is referring to the colors that we assigned in Zbrush can be used as like selection maps. So I can say I can select the brown or I can select the white, and I think we made the door brown and the handle white, and it's just going to make it nice and easy for me to assign a different material to the metal parts than it is to my door parts. The color that we added was vertex color. If you added the color in Maya, it would be a material color, but we used vertex color, so we're going to leave that enabled. But you do have to click on the button to get that to trigger. And all of these settings are going to be fine. One thing I'm going to do before I actually hit bake is close down any other software that I've got open. So I'll just save my Maya and close that. And I'll probably have to close Camtasia just to speed up the process, because like I say, it's going to take about 10 to 15 minutes for it to generate the materials. So I'm going to hit bake now, pause the video, and then unpause it when it's done. So I hit bake. So that baking process is now finished. It did take a good 10 minutes, and you can see what it's created. It's created me a normal map, world space, ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, position, and thickness. And you can see them assigned on the model now. If I just move that down and we can zoom in a bit, and you can see it's captured all of the Zbrush detail that we made, the screw heads, some of the contours on the handle, and it looks quite clean. Even though we had seams in our UV around here, you can't really see any of those seams. We can still see some of that nice surface detail that we added in Zbrush that we can develop further. It's definitely a good time to examine your model and make sure you didn't get any errors in the bake at all, but this looks like it's come out pretty well. So what the textures are that were made, you can see them all listed down here. Currently I'm only viewing it at 2K because the viewport is maxed out at 2, but I could knock that up to 4, and then we'll start to hear the computer purr a little bit, but you can see what the difference in quality is. It does kind of bump it up quite a bit. If I put back to 2K, you can see how quickly it starts to deteriorate. So it is nice to have that very high resolution bake if your machine can support that. So looking at the different passes, we're going to start looking at the base color, of which there is none because we haven't added any color information. Height, that won't be done. These are all ones that we're going to put together as we go. The normal and world space we can see, so we have our normal map that's here as well. If I hover over the top of it, you can see it a little larger, or I can zoom in. So let's just go to the normal map, which we see here. And this is just kind of faking the geometry. that we had in Zbrush making the 18 million. We're doing it with a texture now, which is this normal map. Other maps to look at are world space normal, which is similar, but it's doing it based on position of the object rather than the pixels. So it looks slightly different than the other version, the ID map. These are the colors that we assigned inside of Zbrush, and you can see they've been transferred now as just being white and brown, but we can use them later on, and I'll explain that shortly. Ambient occlusion, which is kind of when light bounces around in a room. It hits a lot of the open surfaces, but some of the cavities get darker down here, and it helps make things feel a bit more natural and tied together. And curvature. Curvature is really good for when we start to making our materials. If we want to add edge wear and things like that, we can really pick out the corners and the shape of the objects using a curvature map. Position, again, it's sort of just saying where it is in 3D space. So if I want to use like a sand or an oil or a moss or something like that, I can say for it to always be at a certain part of the object. So things might be damper at the bottom, they're at the top, and I can use that position map to help that. The thickness map, this one probably didn't even need to be baked, to be honest. What it's done is it's similar to the ambient occlusion, but it's done it on the inside of the mesh. So it's telling me essentially how thick things are, and that's really useful if we're using subsurface, so if we're doing ice or skin or something like that, but not so much on a door. So not really worth making, and it did take a little while to make that one on this point. Cool, so that's all the baking done. Just to quickly show you how we could develop this further, which we're going to do in the next video. So obviously we have these wood lines, which are a nice start, but it'd be nice to develop them further. We can develop the normal map further by either using smart materials or building them up from scratch. In the next video, I'm going to build them up from the start, but here I'll just drag on like a wood beach and drop it on my model. And you'll see that it's also added lines and other variations to the surface, not just the original normal maps. And I can edit these and change the scale of them and play around with them, or use different ones if I was using a different type of wood, or bring in any kind of alpha and change the wood grain on my door. And I can also assign a different material to my metal parts, and that was because I made that ID map. So if I go to my layers tab, you can see that I've now got one layer, which is that wood chip I just dragged in. I might just drag in a steel stained and drop that just above, and that's going to cover everything. But what I can do is right mouse on there and say add mask with color selection, and then I have this option to pick a color. I click on that, pick the white, and now all my metal objects will have that metal assigned. They do all have the normal map, so I'll do the same to this wood chip hole, and just right mouse on there, add mask with color selection, pick a color, pick the brown, and now the wood is just on the wood bits and the metal is just on the metal bits. But there's tons and tons of stuff we can do in terms of maybe adding some white paint and chipping some of it away and adding a lot more natural variation. I tend to very rarely just use the smart materials. I'm always going to go in and edit and create something original, but I wanted to show you just what we're able to be able to do at the start of the next video, and to develop this door even further. So in the next video, I'm going to obviously finish creating textures for this, export them out. We're going to animate it in Maya, and then put that into Unreal and have it trigger the animation with a character walking into it, just to do the full video game workflow with a high resolution asset. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.